Hi, today we're going to talk about Objective 10.4. Describe the structure and function of the stomach, liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. I want to put this video in here. If you haven't watched it, it's an amazing view of digestion. Please check that out. And let's start by orienting yourself. So your stomach is found in your upper left quadrant, like right below where your ribs would end. Your stomach is kind of tucked up in there, kind of hidden behind the diaphragm and the liver. Maybe you know that because you can feel it when your stomach growls. And we've probably experienced this before, but our stomachs have an amazing capacity to be able to stretch to hold more food. So, like a resting stomach without any food in it can hold about 50 mils, but the stomach is able to extend up to 4 liters, or roughly 1 gallon of that liquefied chyme. Lovely. Not something we necessarily want to do all the time, but the stomach is able to do it. So the esophagus dumps into the stomach, and I'd like you to kind of think of the stomach as an enlarged esophagus. Since it's a large area, it's able to serve as a temporary storage tank. And also this is where some more chemical digestion is going to begin. The stomach is covered in rugae. Those are these kind of ridges on the inside of the stomach. That's what allows the stomach to be able to expand from the 50 mils up to the 4 liters. When it was totally expanded, all the rugae would be stretched out. The stomach has the same 4 layers as the rest of the alimentary canal, but if you notice, something is different with the muscularis externa. We have 1, 2, 3 layers of muscle. So the stomach is really good at mechanical breakdown with churning and basically like pummeling the food into little teeny pieces. So that extra muscle going in a different direction, an oblique layer, enables it to contract more. And the stomach is going to join into the small intestine right here. The duodenum is the start of the small intestine. And can you see right here that muscular layer kind of expands into the pyloric sphincter? That pyloric sphincter can open and close to either let food leave the stomach or keep food in the stomach for a longer period of time. And if you haven't done it yet, please check out the Visible Body blog. This is a nice view of the stomach. So we can see esophagus up here, small intestine down here. There's our rugae that allows it to expand, and our 3 muscle layers. Now we're going to take a look at the microscopic anatomy of the stomach. So if you can kind of orient yourself to this diagram, we're zoomed into one small section of the stomach, and this whole layer right here is the mucosal layer. The submucosa are 3 layers of the muscularis externa and serosa on the outside. And now we're going to zoom in right here. So this is my zoomed in picture of just the mucosal layer. And this opening right here is called a gastric gland. And now we're going to zoom in right here and be able to look at those cells up closer. So then this is what I'm looking at right here. Those cells produce the secretions that allow the stomach to be able to digest things. So parietal cells are the bright blue cells over here. They secrete HCl. And if you look at them, what do you notice about their structure? They don't exactly look like normal cells. They look kind of like fuzzy pitchforks. Why? What could the benefit of all of that kind of fuzziness be rather than just having a straight edge? If you said increased surface area, then you're correct. Having all of these jagged projections allows the parietal cells to secrete more hydrogen and more chloride. Chief cells are these purple cells, look more normal, and they secrete a compound called pepsinogen. And pepsinogen is the inactive form of pepsin. Pepsin is the main thing that's able to digest proteins. Pepsin will only be activated in an acidic environment. So first you have to have the parietal cells secrete HCl to lower the pH, and then the chief cells secrete pepsinogen. And if it's acidic enough, the pepsinogen is activated into pepsin and is then able to start digesting proteins. Why do you think it's important that the protein is secreted in its inactive form? Because if it was active in here, it would digest the cell itself. So, how does the lining of the stomach keep itself from getting digested? It has a mucosal barrier, a really thick layer of mucus with bicarbonate ions that's able to neutralize the acidity. The stomach does pretty much everything except ingestion or defecation. It does propulsion because food moves from the esophagus to the small intestine. It's a key player of mechanical breakdown with that extra muscle layer and the churning. It's really important for digestion of proteins because of the pepsin, and it does absorption of a few things, but not so much of the absorption. And let's talk about what causes the stomach to secrete that gastric juice. And when I say gastric juice, I'm talking about the HCl and the pepsinogen that's actually able to break down the food. The stomach doesn't do it all the time. It's going to do it in response to stimuli. So we're going to look at how that could be turned on or off. Starting with cephalic regulation. Cephalic refers to the head, and this is something it's kind of cool. It causes the stomach to start releasing the gastric juice before the food ever enters the stomach. Anything like smelling cookies, or if you see an advertisement on TV for McDonald's or something like that, and then it makes you kind of start to get hungry, that will actually cause your stomach to start releasing digestive enzymes. And it stimulates, which means it's like turning digestion on. Gastric regulation. Gastric means stomach, and this one should be more obvious to us. So, the presence of food in the stomach stimulates the stomach to start producing gastric secretions. And then, after the food gets digested, it increases the acidity of the stomach. And that higher acidity is a signal to stop releasing gastric juices. It has its own mechanism to turn itself off. And one more way, intestinal regulation occurs in the small intestines or the duodenum. When food enters the small intestine, so it goes through the pyloric sphincter into the small intestine, that stimulates more gastric juices to be secreted. And then sometimes if too much food enters and it actually causes the small intestine to distend or kind of like expand, that will inhibit it. So if it gets stretched out, it will kind of turn it off and it will wait and digest the food that it has. Normally, food is supposed to go from the stomach into the small intestine, but I'm sure we've all had the experience where food actually leaves out in the wrong direction. That's called emesis, also known as vomiting. And emesis is a protective function for our body. It can be triggered by some sort of like bacteria or toxin, or if the stomach gets overextended, like beyond that 4-liter capacity. And then we're going to start talking about the liver. The liver filters the blood, but its main digestive function is to secrete bile. And the gallbladder, the small green organ right there, stores the bile that is secreted. Our body is made of water, so it's pretty bad at digesting fats. The liver makes bile, and bile emulsifies fats. Emulsify does not mean digest. Emulsify basically means that it keeps the fat in small drops so that it's easier to digest later. There's a little demo that you can do at home if you have milk and food coloring and soap. You might have done this as a discovery in chemistry, but if you put milk into a dish and some food coloring and then add some soap, that soap will emulsify the fat in milk just like bile emulsifies the fat in our bodies. And when it's doing that, it causes it to swirl around, which makes this kind of like pretty effect. So let me know if you try this out. Take some pictures and share it. And finally, today we're going to talk about the pancreas. If you've been paying attention, we haven't digested very much. Like we started digesting carbohydrates in the mouth and we started digesting proteins in the stomach, but nothing else has really been digested yet. That's why we need the pancreas. The pancreas secretes enzymes to break down basically everything else. So it produces proteases, break down proteins, in addition to pepsin, also protease. It secretes more amylase, just like we had in the mouth, to break down starches. It secretes lipase to be able to break down fats. This does actually digest the fats. And it secretes nuclease to handle nucleic acids. And when I say digestion, I mean we're going from macromolecule or big molecule to little building blocks. Also, the pancreatic juice has a high pH, which is able to neutralize that acidic chyme. If anyone has ever been really sick, like with bad diarrhea, you might have noticed that the diarrhea coming out the other end is actually acidic, like it actually kind of burns your anus. That's because the diarrhea is moving through your intestines so fast, the pancreas didn't have time to be able to neutralize that. So, very appreciative of that function. And here's a picture where we can see everything in relation to each other. So here's the liver, here's the gallbladder. Follow this green little duct right here that enters into the small intestine. So that's how bile gets into the small intestine. And then this kind of corn on the cob looking thing is the pancreas. And here we have another duct, so we can imagine all of those enzymes are going to be here as well. Oh, and by the way, just like in the stomach, those pancreatic enzymes are secreted in their inactive forms. Because if they were active, they would digest the pancreas. But then once they get here and they combine with the chyme, they become activated. And please let me know what questions you guys have. Thank you.